to Human Resource Management. We are nearing the end of the project, so I will be expecting to see people presenting their final projects very soon, because there's a good chance we will run out of time if everybody tries to present on the last day. Last class, we talked about rewards related to human resource management. And then we were talking about incentives. Now we're going to be talking about employee benefits. And incentives. To go through the incentive details, what do you guys think may be the best incentives going forward, knowing that there's this big millennial change, era change? The old people had different incentives than the younger people. So what would you say is a good incentive to get you to enjoy work or be more motivated to work? Time-based things, so being able to, some people will work harder if you give them time off, things like that. Those, like holidays, that would be an incentive. So people will work, they will have the base pay, they'll have the regular pay, but then there's something you give them extra as an incentive to work extra hard. And so some people will work extra hard for more holidays or less work time or flexible work time, some of those things. Okay, let's go through the idea of describing an effective incentive plan. What are 3 different types of individual plans? There's a difference between bonuses and merit pay. And then the idea of stock options. So, incentive variable pay plans are something that is obviously in addition to normal base pay. You have the normal pay for people to do the job, and then in addition to that salary, there's something to encourage them to do extra work, designated to relate pay directly to performance or productivity. It's used in conjunction with the base pay, as I said. It increases the performance reward relationship and motivates the employee. So the motivation of the employee is one of the key things that we need to look at. There are supposedly advantages from the company perspective. It's not permanent. It must be earned each year to get people working extra hard. So let's go beyond some of these basics and start talking again about what are the basic motivators. How can you motivate people? So this is the incentives is supposed to motivate people to go beyond the regular work. The first thing I'd like to do before we talk about that is make sure people are aware of the KPIs. When I was young, I didn't really understand anything what KPI is other than it's part of the alphabet. The older I get, the more I know that almost all organizations are really, really focused on KPIs, key performance indicators. So what that means is it's something like the keywords. When you're doing a big data analysis, you're looking for what is the most important thing when people are searching on the internet. That's the keywords. When you're working with a company, what are the most important things, results people are getting? And those are the key performance indicators. They're going to identify what is important and track those regardless of anything else. If you don't meet these, you're not doing well in the company's mind. So, oops, let me just take some of this away. The requirements of incentive plans. There's the individual versus the group. The individual, it requires employees to perceive special relationships related to their performance. If you specifically do more and get more results, you specifically get more pay or get more of the bonus. Obviously, the group is different. Any ideas as why we separate these and what might be a problem with group or what might be a problem with individuals? If you were the owner of a big company and you're paying people base wages and they're working, but you want extra results out of people. You want to motivate people even more. But if you pay everybody just a lot more, some people aren't going to work that much more. They're just going to benefit from the extra pay and you're not going to get better results. So you give them some extra incentive. Should you do it just one by one? Or should you do it by a team? Or your whole office gets more, or your department gets more, your group gets more? Any ideas about that?
I would say if you use individual pay, it could maybe be bad for the group climate because there could be more competition and rivalry. So maybe being or using a group-based plan would help the morale of the group to work together as a team.
Yes. Almost everybody has heard the expression, 2 heads are better than 1, 3 heads are better than 2. But if you are paying just individuals, doesn't matter if there's just 1 or 100, that one person doesn't want to share and give benefits away, so they're going to just work by themselves. So group-based systems usually manage that. So sometimes you could get extra bonuses if you're helping somebody else in the group. That team spirit comes in the group-based. You ensure that people are cooperative. I've worked for several companies in the past, and there was a lot of politics involved. I'm not talking about government parties. I'm talking about one person wants to look better to the CEO than another person. And so they are saying they are better than the other worker. And sometimes one worker will destroy the other worker's work or make the other worker look bad. So it's actually the opposite of this. If you have an individual-based system, it is prone to becoming political. There could be a lot of office politics in it. So be aware of that when you try to think of what would be a good system. So let's go into the whole idea of what is management. Management generally revolves around motivational theories. And as we discussed before, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs developed in the 1920s, developed even further. Is any questions about Maslow? Maybe I should refresh our memories. What is this? Maslow's hierarchy of needs is developed over 100 years ago. Almost exactly 100 years ago, saying that people need the biological type of protection, the physiological needs. And then after they're able to survive, then they're focused more, they're motivated more on the safety needs. You don't even worry about safety. You're going to run out in front of a dragon to get food if you're starving, which is not very safe. But after you do have food, after you are warm, then you will worry more about your safety. And then after you have your safety, then you'll worry more about your social needs. And then more about your esteem. And then finally, they're saying you want to live to your greatest individual potential. Any comments about this? Is this good where we are here in East Asia and Korea? Is this good still today all around the world? Why did we change from Maslow to Hawthorne and then Herzberg in the 50s, McGregor in the 80s to the other theories? Any ideas? What was a big problem with Maslow? Although he's one of the most talked about theorists, still, some people still love him and promote him a lot. I am a troublemaker.
I think the problem with Maslow is that he only concentrates on the Western world and is not focused on the Asian part of the world, because in the Western, the individual is the most important, but here in Asia, the group is more important.
Yes, so this was developed by a person from one culture, which works, this theory works for people from that culture, but as soon as you go outside of that culture, it stops working. For example, in Japan, that idea of working for yourself and being individual benefits is the opposite. They want to work, some people say, in the big groups. So it's almost flipped upside down. Anyway, later on, I want to motivate you guys. You guys are doing research projects. Hopefully you guys can not just think about those things. It doesn't sound too complicated, right? You want food and warmth or protection to start living. And then after you're going to survive with food and water, then you want to, you're not going to worry about getting scratched. You're going to take care of your safety needs more after you have safety and physical protection. Then you're going to want to have some friends. So it's basically common sense. This one, initially, it seems pretty normal. They were talking about the light bulb. Somebody, Hawthorne, went into a factory who was trying to study what is making these workers work well a long time ago in a factory. And he was watching people and he didn't see big changes. And then he actually just turned the lights off. And he saw that the workers worked more. And he was kind of surprised. And then he kept the lights off, and they after a little bit of time, they slowed down with their working, and then he just turned the lights back on and they started working harder again. And so he realized that generally, as long as the management shows they care and they're involved, then the employees are going to work harder. But if the managers walk away and just hope you're going to be working and they don't care, there's not much interaction, the productivity decreases. And so that's pretty simple. You can't get much simpler than just turning lights on, turning lights off, but that motivates people to work more. Hopefully you guys can develop similar theories for the world. Herzberg is one thing that we're going to be talking about quite a bit. The idea of motivational factors with hygiene and stuff. He's saying as long as you have some of these basic things, you're going to be satisfied. And then if you have other factors, it's just neutral. And then at the bottom, if you have certain conditions, it's either you're upset or very upset. You're dissatisfied or very dissatisfied. And so he's saying you're satisfied if you're given recognition and your advancement. If you have reasonable work conditions and adequate supervision, adequate everything, it's just adequate motivation. And then if you have poor work conditions, poor supervision, low salary, then you have low performance, low motivation. So that also seems to me at least as pretty common sense. McGregor, he's talking about two general theories, theory X and theory Y. In other classes, we talk about how you're supposed to respect all cultures. In this class, we're supposed to do it too, but for demonstration purposes, I'll do this. In some cultures, this is considered bad. Theory X is basically saying, no, don't do it. Some people don't like to do extra. They don't like to really work. They're just working to pay their bills. So the management needs to push them to work. Other types of employees like to work, like to learn, like to develop. So that's the theory Y. And so you give them recognition, you give them the responsibility, you give them access to the equipment or whatever they need, and they can work well. So there's the theory X and theory Y. Again, theory Y is employees are willing to work and prefer more responsibility. Any questions about these? What are some other possible motivational theories? Do you remember? These are the biggest, most famously talked about, especially Maslow. Here. Any hints here? The idea of stock options. What's the stock option theory? That's generally talking about the idea of equity. And there's a few theories related to this. So equity is basically saying that the company makes a certain amount because of me. I make all of the money for the company. I should be getting almost all of the profit. Or if there's 10 employees making it and each one is equally making 10% of the sales or the money for the company, then each one should be getting that 10% of the company's profit sharing, something like that. So the more you put into it, the more you get. That idea of the allocation of the annual compensation, if it's $100,000, one employee is like 50% of it, so it's $100,000 or $50,000. That the whole amount is divided amongst employee 1 versus employee 2 versus employee 3. Over here, the employee 1, 2, and 3, the idea that a certain contribution of each employee to the firm's output. So we're looking exactly at how much the company is making versus how much the company is doing in the sales. Simple version of another theory is just the reinforcement theory. If you have positive reinforcement saying, good job, good job, good job, people are happier. If they're happier, they work harder. And then that negative reinforcement, if you basically threaten somebody or say, I'm going to fire you, or make somebody worry about their job, this theory is saying that people are going to work harder. And so some people were saying that's good for management sometimes to threaten them, the carrot or the stick. If you give them a carrot, if you give them a bonus, if you say good job, they might work harder. If you show a stick and worry them about their job opportunities, some people will work less. And then no reinforcement is the idea of that's not really motivating people. Each theory has problems. It depends again on the culture. Here's a summary of all of them. The Hawthorne studies, Maslow's theories, Herzberg's, McGregor, theory Z. We haven't talked about theory Z today. The McGregor's theory X we talked about, and theory Y. Z is what? And where is Z popular? Where does it come from? You remember? No? It's basically coming from Japan. It's starting the Z here. It's starting that the people in an organization in Japan, they work together and they come up with ideas, and the people at the bottom line, they have the ideas that will go up to their manager, and then their manager will give it to their senior manager, and the senior manager gives it to the director, vice president, to the CEO. The CEO and the board of directors talks about it. If it is good, then it goes back down and everybody's accepting it. So it's not just theory Y or theory Z, it's the idea of everybody is making the ideas. And so it's going through the whole company. A problem with that is it takes a long time. So that's the theory Z. It's grouped together with McGregor's theory X, theory Y. It's basically about the same times. Expectancy theory, again, as we said, workers are motivated if potential rewards, high performance, are desirable and achievable. Equity theory, workers are motivated if they're being compensated in accordance with the perceived contribution to the firm. Reinforcement theory is the carrot and the stick. That idea of good behavior should be positively reinforced, poor behavior should be negatively reinforced. So there's a variety of motivational theories, the adequate compensation, job security, flexible work time that we were talking about, employee involvement programs. And then there's the whole idea of how somebody is going to manage. Almost all of these things, including this, is very culturally specific. This is saying that some people work better if they have an autocratic work environment. That generally means you have like a dictator, one person controlling all of the information, controlling all of the power, and just tells people, do this, do this, do this. And then you have the middle-based system. They're saying more so in Europe. In Europe, they're saying it's more of the, especially in France, it's the free reign style, where the CEO comes in, gives basically the keys to the company to the employees, and the employees just do whatever job they think is best. That's the free reign style. The participative style is where the executives or the managers work together with the workers and make sure that they are saying in their view, this is best. This is balanced. It's not too much this way. It's not too much this way. All of these theories are generally developed by the Westerners. They're developed by North Americans. And so they're saying their way is best. And we have seen that the reality is outside of your culture, your theory has problems. Each culture requires modifications based on the people. What we're seeing more and more is it's not just national, it's groups of people. Some people like to work in big groups. Other people like to work alone. Other people like to have a combination of many of these things. So you need to go through many of these things. So how can you motivate people? Just do the basic work is one issue. The next issue on top of that we're talking about is how to incentivize them. How do you make them do more than just the basics? So, piece rate plan. The employer pays an employee a certain amount for every unit he/she produces. Obviously, pay for performance is probably understood by you guys. The idea of differential piece rate plan, it pays one rate for all acceptable units produced up to some standard, and then if you get more than that, you get paid more. Devised by Frederick Taylor. He's a famous guy, not as famous as Maslow, but good to know about. Plans based on time saved, as you were talking about. The idea of time saving, standard hour plans. A lot of companies in developing or emerging markets, they basically were similar to Korea many years ago in that you have to come into the work, come into the factory, come into the office at a certain time, and you have a badge, you have to check in or sign in saying, I'm starting work here. And then when you go home, you sign out. And so you have that, your pay based on the time you're working. The problem is, I shouldn't be laughing too much. When I first came to Korea in the 1990s, I was going into companies, helping them develop their management details. And I would see people completely lying down on the bed, snoring out loud. Many people, not just one. And it was just accepted. As long as they're at the office, they were okay. As long as they're at the company, that's okay. So this time-based system obviously doesn't work that well either. Most people don't see people sleeping in the office or at the factory, but that same idea. If it's just based on time, people will go in early and then take lots of breaks or not work very hard. People aren't really checking. So that standard hour plans, standard time is set in terms of time it should take to complete a particular job. However, when this is being developed, people slow down. You guys are smart enough, right? If you know you're paid for doing something like making these chairs or tables, and you then hear that I'm going to measure how much time is normal, and then I'm going to pay you based on this. When I'm starting to measure you making this, you slow down. You make this slower than normal so that the standard allows you to relax and still get paid. So there are some problems with this. Give an employee a bonus for reaching a given level of production or output less than standard time. If you slow down and if you can normally make one table in 1 hour, but then when I'm coming in to measure this and we say it takes 2 hours to make this, there's two aspects of it. One, it allows you to still live a comfortable work environment. You can still make one every 2 hours, but then there's other people, if they want lots of money, they just continue working normally and they get double the pay. The problem with that is that team environment, again, might attack that person and make problems. So there are still issues with each system. Commissions. What about commissions? Samsung is going through quite a lot of discussions about commissions plan. That whole idea of selling the phone. Globally, the company pays people a base salary plus every extra phone you sell or every extra Samsung sale that they make in a Samsung sales office, the employees get a special extra bonus. It's based on that commission. The more you sell, the more you get. Rewards employees based on their sales volume. The advantage, it relates rewards directly to performance. The problem is that sales are affected by things that are beyond the control of the employee. For example, in the rainy season, if people aren't going to come to the store, those employees start to starve again. Or if it's really wintry or very cold and people aren't going to come outside, same thing. Environmental factors. Oversales is also a problem. What do you think is a problem with oversales? Let's say Celinda is an amazing worker. Everybody's supposed to sell 10 phones a day or 10 phones a week. And Celinda is selling 12 phones. And you are selling maybe 8 phones. What would be the problem if we start really promoting this commissions and Celinda starts going up to 20 phones are sold every day? Do you see a problem with that? Samsung does. You guess why they're worried about Celinda selling double the normal amount of phones? Shouldn't we love that employee? What's the problem?
It raises the standard for the other employees so that maybe they're measured by something that's not really realistic.
Okay. Other people that are doing the reasonable job may get angry, other salespeople. Yes, that's one thing. But that's not generally what Samsung's worried about. Samsung's worried about something else. That's a very good point, Pia. But Samsung actually wants to focus on some other problem. Maybe with coronavirus, people haven't been going into stores very often or going to a department store very often. When you go to a department store, when was the last time you guys went to a store? You walk close to the store and you hear the people, come on in, sale, 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 buy this, buy this, buy this. You guys like that? I hate that. They start yelling at me, trying to sell me something, trying to be nice to me. I walk away. It bothers me. However, that idea expands even more. If she is an amazing salesperson, like she can sell anything, like the ice to an Inuit, or she could sell ice to an Eskimo, that idea that if she's really good at sales, are customers happy? Maybe the manager might be happy temporarily, but long term, the CEO will get hurt. Why? How are the customers? Is the customer going to be happy that she sells them twice as much as they need? Like they come in to buy a small little cable, but they end up buying a whole new phone every time they go in. Those customers start to hate the company. They blame the company. Why can't I just have a small little cable? You're saying that, oh, we need to upgrade it or it's out of stock. We don't have it. So now you have to buy a new phone and I can give you a good discount for it. So the staff may convince the customer that it might be a good deal there and then, but then when they go home and they start thinking about it, damn it, I only wanted a $2 or $1 code and I ended up paying hundreds of dollars. So the customers lose interest in the company. And so Samsung is trying to find what is a better system than just commissions. So hopefully that's clear. Individual bonuses. The idea of you have a bonus, it's a reward based on doing something special above and beyond the basics. We've talked about several things here. What would you guys prefer? Let's say our school, our classroom is a company. First of all, what are the things that we have to measure? What is required in the classroom? If you're working and I'm working, I assume I'm the boss and you guys are the executives. What is it that we are producing here, first of all? Communication? Is that what you said? Communication? Okay. does the university get benefit by us talking? Okay, it should be, but the university actually doesn't do that. You have to think, how does a university, how does a company grow? And so what you said, that is the ideal situation. You should try to expand your mind, start talking about newer and better things. But unfortunately, people don't pay universities based on just those good talks. How do you know a good university versus a low university? There's a ranking system. Anybody know how that ranking system works? How are some universities ranked at the top of the world and some universities are not even in the ranking? Any guesses?
Isn't it based on the number of the papers published by the professor or the students?
Yes. Nothing to do with students. Has nothing to do with actual communication in the classrooms. That idea of maybe communicating to the world, yes, but they measure the number of papers a university publishes, period. That system actually has a flaw. If you guys write a class paper and publish it in a student journal, the universities could say those count. And surprisingly, internationally, they don't really check. They're just asking the university, how many publications did you have this year? And they count them. So you understand how a university works. Now, how are we going to make an incentive system for you guys to work harder? It should be the classroom. It should be that you get jobs, but that's actually a small part of it. What would motivate you to work more than just regular for the school's benefit?
I think maybe if it's a very interesting topic that I'm interested in, I would be happy to work on it, and therefore I would be happy to be supported by the university, and with this also kind of support the university too with my work. So it would be more of an intrinsic motivation because I like doing it.
Okay, so some of the employees, Pia, if she likes doing it, she can continue doing it. And there are universities like that. You can find universities that if you publish a paper, they'll pay you, period. But there's most of those, actually it's complicated. Most universities, they will pay professors a base salary, and inside this, for example, this university, you have to publish basically one paper every 2 years. So this university, for example, last week I published 2 papers, which means I don't really have to work anymore for the next year and a half. I don't really need to care about students. I don't really need to care about coming to the classroom because I already have the amount of work the executives of the university require. And so what Pia is saying is that if she wants to do it, she can make an agreement with the university. And the university, actually, the president of the university doesn't usually manage this. Even HR doesn't manage this. It's each professor one by one, because each professor says they're all very, very specific. So if Pia wanted to work with this university, she'd have to get an agreement with usually one professor to maybe co-teach a class, but she would find ways to make the paper and somebody else would just teach the class. Other universities have more varieties, and so you can find universities that you don't have to teach a class, you just do what Pia likes and publish a paper, and they will pay you like a commission. If you do one paper, you get paid for that. Some universities in China, if you have the top publication, you can get $165,000 for one top paper. That's like how many cars just for one top paper? Okay, what else? You were saying something? Yes, if you are working and she's just pretending she's a student that gets paid. So we are a company and I am the CEO of the company, you're the executive. Same thing, I'm the professor, you're the student. What would you want to work better, to be a better student?
Maybe like some kind of relation that when like that was good or performing well or something like that, that we can join conference or something where we can learn something new or get new connections or something like that. So like it, yeah, like a reward trip or something.
Okay. Isn't that standard? What I do in class, the very first PPT I showed you guys, I showed you, you get points for the attendance, you get points for participation, points for the project. And at the end, if you make a paper, you don't have to, but if you make a paper, give it to the company, you will do much better. I've had some students that sold that paper for $120,000 to a company in the States. So there is that benefit, and that usually provides jobs too. Other students, as you were saying, they just want to network more to have more job opportunities. And so I was saying, if you have papers, I can show you to conferences. Doesn't every professor do that? No. Should they? Maybe we need to kick them. Good idea. I'm doing it. Did you guys remember? Did you remember that first slide? I think it was the very last slide I said. Some students can go, there's lists of conferences. Usually there's conferences around the world all the time. You just open the calendar and they'll show you dozens of conferences anywhere in the world each week or each month of the year. So you can go and present your stuff there. Usually those conferences are designed around the publishing because universities don't actually care about a conference at all. So your idea, it is good for the students, but universities don't usually get points and nobody usually measures. This university went to more conferences than this university. So how big is the points we would give you for promoting going to conferences? Zero, yes. Since the university doesn't get benefits from going to conferences, that's probably why other professors don't promote it. Any other ideas? What would motivate you to work? You like the conversation? Okay, so how can I compensate you to be a good student? How can I compensate you to be a good executive here?
I never thought about it. I like this method. I need to think through how I can benefit from this method.
Let's actually start tearing it up. Many professors, I think most professors, they don't promote making things for companies or making things to go to conferences. What do they do? How do they start the class? Don't they open up a big sheet and say, student 1, are you here? Student 2, are you here? Student 3, are you here? Isn't that generally the only thing that they register as far as doing anything in class, except for at the end of the year, they give you a quiz on a topic. Isn't that how most professors work? And yet the research shows that's terrible. Again, you can get attendance points and you come and then sleep in class. Or you come, you get your name checked, and then you go to the bathroom and you don't come back. You still, the people are smart. They find ways around it and they don't follow. So that attendance system, just coming to class isn't doing it. And the idea of thinking and talking about new ideas is great, but universities don't pay for that. Universities can't register that usually. So think about all of these things. What are the incentives that a company should use? It's not that simple because each worker, some workers will work very, very hard designing it, even though they're in a sales department. Maybe they're designing how they do the sales, and they don't like to talk to other people. So you can't actually give them a commission based on how many times they talk to customers and sell something. They don't like that. Other people may be terrible at the design or terrible at the statistics or terrible at writing down how many sales they have, but they love partying and talking to customers. So they'll have lots of sales, but the company records get messed up. So there's always some sort of balancing act that you have to do. It's not really a simple, straightforward idea.
I do have a question. So we have been talking about how to motivate employees, employers, employees by providing some incentives, by checking their productivity and their checking how much they sold. But what about the service area, like the nurse, the patients, a patient, or they are limited? The number of the patient wouldn't go even though they want to work harder, and the time of the work that is kind of set for the nurse. Because I heard a lot of the nurse in the local area hospital, they over 60% of the nurse, they would like to move their work in within 3 years. So what would be the good ways to motivate them?
Right now, what do you think is the normal compensation system for nurses? You guys all know nurses at hospitals, nurses at clinics. How are they compensated now? Usually they're just paid a flat pay. You get your base pay, which is, this much compared to a doctor here, even though the nurse probably, no, not probably, the nurse spends maybe 10 times more time with the patient than the doctor, the nurse gets this much pay. Okay. Can one nurse work harder than another nurse? Yes, they can. Do they get paid for that? Only in certain situations. That certain situation is if one nurse takes time off or gets sick, they have to call in somebody else, a different nurse, to work extra time. So if the nurse works extra time, double shifts, then they get more paid. Generally, as far as I know, that's the regular way nurses are compensated. And that is not usually a great way. For example, a lot of nurses in Canada are paid a low amount, and nurses in the States are paid higher. So a lot of nurses, once they graduate school, they try to move down to other states in the United States, or they try getting their training in the States. They'll just move to wherever that compensation, the base compensation, is usually higher. And the quality of nursing is not usually managed. This whole thing that we're talking about, Jung Ho, needs to be improved for nurses. Make a proposal for that, and you might be famous. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I have not thought about the suggestions, but I was just curious, like how to motivate their work performances, because yeah, as I know, they have a flat payment system. Even though they work harder, they will get like probably same amount. They're not kind of motivated. They would like to love to move their work every time. So I was just curious about it.
Talking about now is the whole idea of suggestions. Companies should take suggestions, but many companies don't. So when you're planning to work for a company, you should know about all of these options, but also understand why some people might not like them. The idea of each method can have good things and bad things about it, good points and bad points about it. So you need to think about those things. Let's go through and take a look at this. When paying doesn't pay off. Here's a small video talking about it.
Did you know that companies often set up time bombs for themselves? Truth is, you may be this very bomb. Here's a usual collaborator. Like any other human being, our mind is constantly struggling to choose a course of action, evaluating different incentives. These incentives can either be intrinsic or extrinsic. But only the strongest incentive will trigger action. The question is, which one? Organizations mostly rely on monetary rewards to motivate their employees. Yet, such incentives create at least two important problems. We call the first problem the incentive life cycle, or the Cobra effect, named after a cobra plague of Delhi in the 19th century. At the time, the city was infested with snakes, and in order to get rid of the problem, the governor introduced a bounty for cobra skins. At first, the population of snakes started to decrease. Productivity increased. But then, when it became more and more difficult to catch cobras, people found a way to game the system. They started farming them. When the governor realized it and stopped paying for skins, cobras became worthless and farmers released them into the city. In other words, monetary rewards led to the opposite effect compared to what was hoped for. It is the very same adverse incentive mechanism that contributed to the recent financial crisis. The second problem is equally vexing. We call it the blood donor dilemma, or the incentive competition effect. Let's say, for instance, that we wanted to increase the volume of blood donations. To do that, we introduce an extrinsic reward and start paying blood donors. Oddly enough, empirical evidence shows that following such a policy change, the number of blood donors actually decreases. Why? Because those who used to donate because it was the right thing to do stopped as they saw it as a paid service and the financial reward was not high enough for them. Their intrinsic motivation had been crowded out. Incentives shape the way we perceive reality. Yet science shows that most organizations do not anticipate their actual consequences. So if you want organizations to incentivize smartly, click on the bomb before it explodes and share this video with your colleagues.
So, again, the whole idea, what were they saying here? The idea of cobras. What was the idea? Can you summarize? What are they talking about with cobras?
CEO CEO company said that if someone takes snakes come bring snake, they will pay a certain amount of money. It won't count on a certain period of time, but then people and farmers have an idea of farming them, then problem again.
Okay, so does this ring a bell? What are we talking about here? Isn't that this system here? Aren't we talking about this light bulb theory? This was developed in the 1920s. The idea of if you care for people, that's one thing. If you give them attention, if you give them something, then they will work harder for it. But they found out that there's a way around it. For example, if I get paid for making papers, you can make a paper like Pia said and get paid for it. What is the problem with that now? A lot of people will make a paper and then sell it to 3 different universities or 3 different magazines and things. Or they'll just copy somebody else's paper and say they made it. Is the CEO going to read it? No. Does HR usually read it? No. Most people don't usually read those papers. So a lot of universities are basically doing that. Or even the quality of those papers, just like we were talking about. I will pay you if you have a cobra. I will pay you if you have a snake. Then people will just go and find any snake not related to the company and they still get a bonus. Or worse, what they were doing, they were making their own cobras. They would have a cobra farm and get extra pay for it, so it actually hurts the company. Almost every system we have has that. It starts out well, but then there's a problem. So what can you do about it? How do you manage companies well? We get into this whole idea of suggestions. Jungo gave a suggestion to think about something. That whole idea of giving a suggestion to improve the company or improve the class, isn't that a good thing? How can you work with that? You can give bonuses based off of suggestions. So the suggestion thing is a company will pay people if you have a good idea to help the company. When was the last time you heard you could get any benefit for giving a suggestion to the university to improve? Or any company? Most companies don't usually follow this, but they should. If you are going to get into HR, keep this in mind, right? As long as somebody has a good suggestion that results in increased benefit or increased profits, reduced costs, improved customer relations, all of these things, you should get a reward for. Even if you're not doing this work, just having the idea, you should get a benefit from. Some companies aren't actually following that open-minded, modern management style. It provides a means for making employees feel part of the organization. You feel like you're running the organization. You feel like it's your business. You're not just a wheel that's turning inside somebody else's company. If you can create suggestions to change the company, people are usually much, much happier. Fortunately, it's not usually implemented. What is implemented? Elon Musk is famous, but his base pay is what? $1 a year, something crazy like that. So why does he do it? What is his incentive to do it? Anybody know? Yes? Oh. Okay, so he's getting stock options, but why is he getting stock options? Is he just getting pay at the end of the year? He gets extra stock at the end of the year? No. It's really right. His contract is if the company's stock value reaches a certain point, he gets so much stock reward. And so if it keeps growing that way, he gets a reward. If the company's stock value goes down, he doesn't. Right. So he's motivated those ways. What are the problems with that? Sometimes the stock value does not reflect the actual operations of the company. For example, the stock value was going up very fast, even though the company was losing money giving cars away at the beginning, that type of thing. So yes, stock options are one point. Let's go to that. Here, this stock grants and managerial options, the idea of a stock grant, it occurs when a company gives stocks to managers as part of their normal compensation. That's one thing. Incentive stock options is what we're talking about with Tesla, a form of qualified stock option plan in which a manager like Elon Musk does not have to pay any tax until the stock is sold, is one aspect. So we're seeing that there's many small details. The higher you get, the more advanced you are, the more details you get. You should be aware of the details. If you're not aware of all of these small details, like even the tax on the stock, I'm going to give you a prize. And somebody sees, well, do I have to pay tax on the prize or not? If somebody asks some company managers those details, they're going to say, forget it. You're not going to get it anymore if you're going to be picky about it. But usually the top executives, they do know these details and they negotiate these details. Be aware of these ideas. One drawback is that the company does not get tax deductions even for giving tax deductions to the employees. What is a benefit of just paying people with stock? how much does it cost the company to actually make stock or split their stock? We have this many stocks. Next year, we're going to have this many stocks. Generally, it doesn't cost the company very much at all, right? It's just the idea is you're sharing things, and you're going to share more of these things. You're going to be making more. So why don't companies give all employees stock? Any ideas?
If share all the stocks with all the employees, if the workers don't like the CEO, they can buy all the stocks and they can nominate new CEOs, and company will go away.
Theoretically, that's correct, but technically, it's almost impossible to get all stock owners together in one room for a vote. Usually, somebody owns stock from the other side of the world, or somebody that's super rich owns a stock and they're on vacation on some tropical beach. So that vote that determines the pay or determines who's going to get fired or what CEO is going to get hired again, it's very, very hard to get all 100% of the stock owners to join that meeting. And since almost, less than 10% of the stock owners come to the meetings, who makes the decision? Who represents everybody else? The CEO. That's why the CEO can say, I'm going to get my pay. Everybody agree? They say, no, no, no. I say, yes, I win because I represent everybody else that's not here. That is one type of thing to think about. Were you aware of that, Jumbo? You understand?
Yes. Yeah.
Many of you guys like Apple iPhones and the computers. Did you know when Tim Cook started working, his first year compensation? Any idea? Anybody? Take a crazy guess. Whatever your crazy guess, it's much, much more. Anybody know what Tim Cook's first year pay? 2011, I think, when he started after Steve Jobs died. Anybody guess? Guess a crazy number. 100 million. Still way too low. Guess a crazier high number. Much more than 100 million. Sorry?
1 billion.
Not a billion. At that time, 10 years ago, a billion was still crazy. Now, yes, Elon Musk is getting billions of dollars. But at that time, he got, I think it was $547 million or something like that in his first year compensation. And the next year, it was something like 20% or 50% higher. And yet, everybody loved the idea of Apple, so nobody was rejecting it. He got it. Other companies, the CEOs got more than $100 million in salary, and the workers and the stock owners, they were saying, that's crazy. We're losing money and you're getting high pay? No, I don't like it. But that CEO, he was saying that, okay, let's take a vote. Even though everybody here votes no, I have 90% more people not here that I control, I represent them. I vote for them, I vote yes, they got it. So yes, that idea of stock options, there's problems with that too. Make sure you understand the details. And then it gets even more complicated, the idea of stock for stock swaps, or the idea of stock appreciation rights, or phantom stock, or restricted stock. A lot of people have no idea what these things are. Each detail, basically the point is you need to understand the details. Whatever you're working with, understand what motivates that company and what is that company motivated for. For example, you should be motivated to learn. Is a school, any school you've heard of, better for learning than somebody else? You guys are here. You're at a school. Some of you have come from other countries around the world. Why did you choose here? that whatever the answer is, shouldn't that be what the school should pay for? And yet almost no schools really pay for that. Some schools are tracking it. A few schools are tracking how many international students they have, but generally it's just a number and they don't really care. So be aware, the reality of what people do and how organizations are managed, sometimes they don't match. Why? Because these theories, these ideas, these research projects to find better ways are rare, or they're made like when I was in school 40 years ago. And so they keep keeping that same style that's 40 years old and they don't really change. Whatever you're doing, hopefully you guys become interested in just the idea of learning. Whatever job you have, keep learning about it. Don't just learn about your job, learn about the company, and then learn about the customers. What motivates the company to grow? Because your interests have to align with their interests. And then you might be able to make proposals to help. Same thing for your job interviews. When you're going to a job interview, it doesn't matter really what you like. It generally only matters that person that's hiring you, what do they like? And you need to align your answers to match them. So keep trying to think in that way, the mutual benefit way. In the research way, you have to research what that person wants. You have to research what that company wants. You have to research what that country wants or the customers want. It changes everywhere you go. Can I get a couple of questions about this? We've talked about various different stocks. We've talked about paying for ideas. What about in Korea? How do most Korean companies work? Any ideas? You go work for Samsung, you go work for any company outside, you'll get your base pay. Is your base pay going to get you rich? Generally, no, anywhere in the world. Most base pay doesn't get you rich almost anywhere in the world, except if you're maybe crazy investment bankers that get paid very, very high amounts. Most people, they're just being paid a little bit above the cost of living. So they're comfortable. So how are companies working? Everybody's working outside. Any idea? How does Samsung generally promote regular Korean workers?
I heard that the workers who worked hard during the year, they compensate workers by quarterly, and they get some certain huge amount of money every quarters based on their achievement.
Okay, good. Usually the companies need to track how much you're working versus how much you're working versus how much you're working. They measure your results. And yes, they measure those results every quarter. That's when you have your meeting with your boss, but they don't usually pay you each quarter. They pay you just once, usually at the end of the year, called the annual bonus. Well, how big is that bonus? Any ideas? How is it determined here?
I heard that like it depends on the situation of the Samsung, but it's like twice as much as their usual payment.
Okay, so usually you're paid in 1 year 12 different paychecks. And at the end of the year, the normal is if you have 12 different monthly payments, at the end of the year, you get one extra monthly payment. That's kind of popular. It's based off of slow, regular growth. But sometimes the best companies usually pay the biggest bonuses. So Samsung employees, your monthly pay, it's not really that big. The monthly pay is just It's so-so. But at the end of the year, sometimes those top companies give not just 1 month extra pay, just like what we were talking with Tim Cook, sometimes you get 19 months bonuses just at the end of the year. So you're working January, you get 1 month pay. December, you get 1 month pay. And then at the end of the year, you get 19 extra paychecks. That is based on the company doing very well. Lots of profit, so they'll pay lots of bonuses. That's one of the reasons that made Samsung so big. They gave the most bonuses at the end. But even then, how can a company afford to do that? If you guys are in HR, you should know the details, the ins and outs. How is a company working? What do the workers want? What do the manager wants? Well, most workers just think the company's making, yeah, a little bit of profit. Until you know in CNN that this company is making so much money, then you start asking for more, then the company starts offering these 19 months bonuses. But usually employees don't really know how much profit they're making. So they're paid a little bit. Most companies, usually your executive salary, if you're, for example, if you're paid $100,000, sometimes the company is making like $2.5 million off of you. Every $2.5 million, they can hire another executive, that type of thing. But most workers don't know that type of thing. So when you're negotiating, the more you know about that, the better it works. Any of you guys heard those statements? Like this company generally expects the company to make this much sales off of this worker. We hire this worker, we expect this. Have you guys ever heard of those? Like a high-tech company, $100,000 salary for more than $1 million in sales. Sometimes it was $2.5 million in sales. So check those ideas. That's the annual bonus. We've already talked sometimes about performance shares. We are in a classroom now. I'm supposed to be motivating you guys to do things and share ideas. So are done. You only have, 3 more big weeks or classes left. What do you want out of this class? And at the same time, after you answer that, I'm going to be asking everybody, how should I be rewarding you guys? How should I be paying you guys? How should I be compensating you guys? Are you doing something to get those points now? So let's go back to your first question. What do you want to learn if we only have 3 weeks left? Okay, I can just give you a whole bunch of books. I've got an online library of like 1,000 books. I'll give you the password. You want me to read it for you? I can give you the audio books. As you're walking to class, you can listen to it. I usually do that driving in the car. I'm listening to these audio books. So I'll design an audio book that only works when you're walking. So you have to be walking and then you hear the education. Good, I've got Celinda's motivation down. Do you see what we're talking about? We're talking about something serious, and yet there's some crazy way that you could answer that. There's a crazy way that you could compensate that. And that's the way that life is. So start thinking outside the box. What's going on? How can you work with people? You have to understand the system. Life is a game. What is the rules of the game? And then how can you work with the game? Do you have another idea? You don't care what you learn. That's okay. I'll just put on music and videos. Let's watch some movie the next couple of classes. Is that a good idea? We'll watch a documentary movie. Okay, I can sleep. Next class, everybody watch this documentary. Netflix, yay! Come on, what would you like to do in the next 3 weeks of classes? Or Jomo or Pia, whoever else is still online. What would you guys like to do in the next couple of weeks? How should I be motivated? What is my incentive to help you guys? Isn't it But doesn't it have to be based off of what you want? You would think that, right? And yet we've just seen two people, they don't know what they want. Or what they say they want, it's easy to get around it. And that's not, it's not just you, it's so many people, they don't really know what they want. And so companies are just paying you. The more you learn, the more interesting life gets. Charo, Pia, what would you like in the next 3 weeks?
And I would like to get more knowledge that I can use later, that I can really, that helps me, for example, as an HR manager, that I can use to motivate employees, or that also help me with negotiation strategies. And I also would like good grades for all of our presentations, please.
The grades information is already posted there, right? You should be able to see that any day in our system. Let me just show you where that stuff is. You understand, this is our class files, right? And the marks are here based off of your information here. You see that, right? And the projects that you present are the yellow numbers. You keep going through it from week 1 all the way through week 7, week 9, week 10, week 11. We are now week 12. And again, why a good reason to show this is the more you guys share anything, the more points you get. You guys can share some Netflix movie about HR management and you get points for that. She can find an audio book and she get points for that. Sharing those things. That's the way this class is made. And yet a lot of students still just come here and sit and wait. So try to get involved in the management, sharing details. That's where the points come from. This is clear to you, right, Pia?
Yes, it's just because you asked, so I thought I'd say that again.
Are you planning to share your files soon? I suggested, I believe from day 1, you guys should be sharing your project almost every week. Why? Because whatever your idea is, the problem is it's your idea. You're not going to be successful unless you check other people's acceptance of your idea or understanding of your idea, or they understand the intention of it. And the more you start sharing it, the more other people might be able to help you. In HR, as Pia just said, one of the best parts of being successful in HR is you know many people. You need to be networking well. How many of you have developed in Kakao? Do you have many Kakao accounts or many Kakao contacts? Because almost everybody in Korea has a Kakao account. You should be very active there. What about the idea of on social media? Are you very active on social media? Are you active in those groups where you want to work? Because the companies will benefit from that. All of those things, like LinkedIn accounts, please start learning more about that. The more you get in there, the better. So with that said, I guess class is finished for today. I highly suggest you guys start telling us when you want to present. Like you can see at the beginning of the semester, there's lots of extra materials over here at the site. The last couple of classes, we're leaving room for you guys to be presenting. If you don't reserve a time and everybody comes at the last minute, there's not going to be much time to share. Harder to get points.